Tonight on Let It Rip.
Marijuana, the burning weed with its roots in hell. In this film, you will see the ease with which this vicious plant can be grown in your neighbor's yard, rolled into harmless-looking cigarettes.
This was what Hollywood thought of marijuana back in 1936. They called it the gateway to reefer madness.
I was hoping that you would smoke out of a bong today.
Oh, yeah?
More than 80 years later, public attitudes have changed. And tonight, we're on the eve of a bold new world. The legalization of the recreational use of marijuana in Michigan is just hours away. But there are still some rules you need to know. Time to let it rip. On the panel tonight, she spent 22 years in television, including 8 years here at Fox 2 before health problems forced her to retire. For the last year, Antoinette Jameson-Sarfo, known as Q, has helped to anchor the movement that led to the legalization of recreational marijuana here in Michigan. Welcome home, Q.
Thank you.
Next to her, a man who spent more than 23 years serving and protecting the people of Michigan. A graduate of the FBI Academy and the public voice of the Michigan State Police, Lieutenant Mike Shaw is here. So is the principal attorney and founder of the Cannabis Legal Group. Barton Morris helped to write the law that regulates marijuana like alcohol. But not everybody is happy with this new law. Scott Greenlee, the organizer of the group Healthy and Productive Michigan, says there may be some unintended consequences that could hurt us all. As always, the hardest working man in TV, a man who has never inhaled, anchor attorney Charlie Langton. Q, let's begin with you because you've been in this fight for a long time. But when you take marijuana, either smoking or ingesting it, it's medicine for you. For some of the people who plan to get high tonight at midnight, they just wanted something to get high with. Are you at all concerned about accidents, injuries, the increases possibly in death because of this?
I'm not. Michigan has the second largest medical marijuana population behind California. So there are already almost 300,000 people in Michigan that are card-carrying members of this community. So they are medical marijuana card holders. And these people have been responsible for the 8 to 10 years this system has been in place. The medical system has been in place. I think that it's safe to assume that of those 300,000 people who have been using it for medical reasons, they've also used it for recreational reasons, and they've been responsible. And those who aren't responsible should suffer the consequences. But I think this is a wonderful opportunity for responsible adults to use a substance that is safer than alcohol, non-toxic, and won't kill them. So this is a long day coming. You said that I've been in this fight for a long time, but I haven't been in this fight nearly as long as the people who started this fight in Michigan back in 1968. So it's been a long road for them, and at midnight, we're going to celebrate.
Well, Lieutenant Shaw, I don't know if you'll be celebrating.
I will not.
I think you'll be very, very busy.
Yes.
But that's a question that many people have. You know, when you stop somebody for drunk driving, there's a breathalyzer test that can be administered. How do you know that someone is high behind the wheel?
So I think first we got to take a look at it. The state's not going up in smoke, so to speak, at midnight just because this happened. We've seen it with the medical marijuana. We've seen it with the CPL licenses. We've seen it with different things where everybody's all up in arms. For us, we just want to make sure people know what they're supposed to be doing and know what the law is. Hopefully, when they voted for it, the law was right there. So if they didn't read it when they voted for it, that's another let it rip we can have. But what we're really concerned about is we've seen 45% of our fatal crashes this year is due to drunk and drug driving. So this is before the law passes today. So what we as a department are saying to people is, you know, if you're going to use it, it's legal. The people have spoken by, what, 60 to 40%. Don't get behind the wheel, because if you get behind the wheel, we're going to arrest you today, we're going to arrest you tomorrow, we're going to arrest you next week, because that's where people are actually dying, is when you get behind the wheel, when you're impaired by anything, alcohol, marijuana, habitual, you know, NyQuil, cough syrup, you name it. So that's what we're more concerned about, is the people getting behind the wheel.
And just to be clear, you know, Charlie couldn't just take a joint light and go out on 9 Mile Road and smoke it.
And that's true. So and this is where you got to kind of be careful.
Not that you would.
It's kind of funny.
It's hypothetical.
That's right. So this is a ballot initiative that didn't go through a lot of the legal portion of it when the actual legislature goes to. And you'd be surprised. Him and I were talking about public spaces, and he's more restrictive than I am when I consider a public space. When we did the thing this morning, you know, your front porch. We consider the front porch private property. You can sit on your front porch to us. Now, he says maybe a little different. So that's what we're going to look at here as we work our way through this process. Is the same thing with medical marijuana, is there's going to be bumps and bruises and all that kind of stuff going along. But I can tell you, if you drive impaired, we're going to get you.
Meanwhile, Barton, a medical marijuana card holder can go to Q's new dispensary without a problem. But if he or she does not have a card, they're not supposed to buy it from her. Is that correct?
That's one of the hallmarks of our new law. There shall not be any sales of recreational or adult use marijuana, but it can be given. It can be gifted. So a caregiver or a patient even that purchased it from a medical store can give it to somebody else.
So you can't buy it, you can't sell it, but you can give it away.
Yes, up to 2.5 ounces. It's just like alcohol. Like if you come over to my house and I give you a drink or I give you a bottle, I can do that. There can be a free exchange because that's just common, right? But I can't be selling it. You have to have a license to sell it, and there will be no licenses available until 2020.
All right, let's define public spaces. Not down 9 Mile Road, 8 Mile Road, on private property only. Your driveway, your backyard, inside your house. Those are private spaces.
So I interpret this to mean that a private space is a place where the public cannot go into, right? There's some places even in a private home, like in my front porch. I believe that because the public is invited to my front porch, then I can't be using marijuana. Anybody can't be using marijuana on my front porch. That's a public space, even though it's on my private property. Now, my backyard, nobody's able to come into my backyard, even if it's fenced in or not fenced in. So that's my interpretation. Ultimately, that's going to be something that's interpreted by the courts. This is going to be litigated, obviously, that people are going to have their own interpretations. My interpretation, based upon case law, is that if it's publicly accessible, that is a public place.
Well, better to play it safe. Yeah. Meanwhile, Scott, you lost the war, but the battle is still underway. Many Republicans in Lansing are trying to make some minor changes. What would you like to see?
Well, I'd like to see a lot more restrictions than what was actually voted through. I think that 2.5 ounces is too much. Now that's passed, it would be almost impossible to change. It'd take a very large percentage of the legislature or another public vote to change that. I think 10 ounces is too much. It makes Michigan the most liberal recreational marijuana state around. And also, there's just so much ambiguity in this proposal, this 6,500-word document that was written that obviously most voters didn't read all of those 6,500 words. We know that for a fact. So it's going to be interesting. Barton mentioned, you know, you can gift 2.5 ounces. How often can you do that? Can I go find somebody who has a medical card? Can I pay them in cash? Who knows? I mean, I know no money exchanges in a perfect world, but we live in an imperfect world. So can I go and I say, hey, I want to get my 2.5 ounces. I just want to go have some fun. Okay, here you go. Here's your gift. Okay, great. I come back an hour later. Hey, what do you know? I used my 2.5 ounces. I'd like another 2.5 ounces.
No, the answer
that doesn't happen.
No, you're allowed to have 2.5 ounces at any given time.
And if you use it or if you stash it in your house,
ounces, that's too much.
Sure, unless you run it and put it home and you come back and get another 2.5 because you get up to 10 at your house, right?
Right, that's right.
So then you use a whole bunch of it, and then so how often can you do that? Is
Until
the question.
You
can literally do that every hour.
Why does it matter?
Meanwhile, there's another important issue. It's still against federal law, Charlie.
Obviously.
And employers have the right to fire you if you show up for work high.
So let's take a look at federal law. First of all, there's not a whole lot of people in federal court on small amounts of pot charges. It's not happening. The U.S. attorneys are not going to prosecute people for that. So forget the federal law. Oh, yes. Large quantities, pounds of this stuff, oh, yes. The feds will be all over that. Hold that thought. You do raise a good question. If my employer wants to say no pot, and I'm going to test my employees, they can do that legally. And if they test positive, they can be fired. And the law will say you can be fired.
Do they have to warn you before they test you?
It should be in an employee handbook. That would be a little bit better. Yes. So the answer is yes. So just like an employer can say no smoking. Hospitals do it all the time. So yes, there are some restrictions that employers, private people, can say, I don't want my employees to smoke pot. That's okay. That's okay.
But remember, it stays in your system a long time, a lot longer than something like alcohol, which is why it's not at all like alcohol. And random drug tests are typically in an employee handbook, so they don't have to give you any warning. You could do something tonight. They could randomly test you on the 21st. It'd still likely be in your system. You could lose your job.
But would you still be high on the 21st?
Oh, no. We're not saying you're going to be impaired. We're saying it's in your system. How does the employer know when you took it? That's the real problem.
Employers typically, if you get hurt on the job, the first thing that an employer will do in a workers' comp, they send you to a doctor, they give you a drug test, and if you test positive for pot, you could be fired and denied workers' comp.
It's going to be a real insurance issue, too.
Big deal.
A lot of issues to cover, a lot more controversy to come. We thank you for your comments and your insights. Stay right there. Coming up, thousands of people in Michigan are now serving time in prison for marijuana convictions, many of them for small amounts of weed, the same amounts that will soon be legal. Should these convicts now be released now that their crimes are no longer crimes? That debate is ahead. Stay with us.
I think that the people of Michigan have said that for conduct that would now be considered legal, no one should bear a lifelong record for that conduct.
That is Governor-elect Gretchen Whitmer. With Proposal 1 now approved, she wants to grant clemency to people with minor marijuana convictions. Welcome back to Rip. With us right now is Vita Gamo, a woman whose husband is now in prison for selling marijuana. But now that the drug will soon be legal here in Michigan, should he and thousands more like him be released? You've already met Q and Barton, Scott, and Charlie, so Vita, let me begin with you. What happened to your husband?
Well, a couple of years ago, we got a knock at the door at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it was a raid by the NET, they call it. It's 3 county police officers, and they came and told us that my husband was growing too much marijuana plants, that he owned properties that where people told him that he was growing more weed that he's supposed to be growing.
So he had a medical marijuana dispensary, but he was growing pot in other places, other locations, and then putting that pot in his store for sale.
That's what the police say, yes.
And according to the police, what he was growing, the amounts were illegal.
Yes.
Regarding his business.
Yes.
And he pled guilty to the charge.
Yes.
And he's now in prison for 5.5 years.
Yes.
Why do you think he should be released, although he pled guilty to the crime?
He pled guilty because if he would not pled guilty, if we would go to trial, the sentence probably would be 7 to 15 years. So he obviously gonna take a plea. We got 3 kids at home, so he wanna be with his kids. So I think he would have to be released at this moment because the law changes. He wasn't no violent criminal at all. And I think 5.5 years is like a little too harsh for somebody that is not violent. There's no other drugs involved. There's no guns. There's nothing at all. And I think, again, 5.5 years is too much for a no violent criminal. And now that the law changes for marijuana, I think it's too much.
Barton, you have another client, too, that's in a situation not quite as bad as her husband's, but another one of your clients had her car confiscated because she simply bought $10 worth of marijuana at a medical dispensary without a medical card.
Right. In the city of Detroit, the county of Wayne, dispensary was in operation selling to people without medical marijuana cards, but the Wayne County Sheriff was taking advantage of those individuals by forfeiting their vehicles and seizing them simply because they purchased that marijuana. $10 worth of marijuana, and they took her car, made her pay $1,200 to get it back. I filed a lawsuit because that is an excessive crime, excessive penalty. It's forbidden by the 8th Amendment, and it's cruel and unusual punishment. It's not proportional to the crime. And so, we're going to see what happens with that.
Well, Scott, that's a big question in light of the legalization of the recreational use of marijuana in Michigan. what should the penalties be for breaking the law?
Sure, that's a great question, and it's very interesting because what I've found is, and I don't know specific situations like with your husband, with all due respect, and I know all that was medical and obviously happened before the vote happened and before midnight of tonight. So the issue now is, what do we do? And I've been on record as saying, if somebody has a simple possession situation, there's no way they should wind up in jail. If somebody has a first-time use or a second-time use, they're at a college party and they try it, they don't need to go to jail. We've never been in favor of that. Our committee's never been in favor of it. And in fact, in talking to most law enforcement, I'm talking the Sheriff's Association, the Prosecutors Association, the Chiefs of Police Association, they say those situations are very, very rare. There's always an outlier, of course. But for example, about a month and a half ago, the Ingham County Sheriff and I were doing a seminar together. The sheriff obviously keeps track of who's in jail, so he took a look that day and found that there were 437 inmates in the Ingham County Jail. Of those 437 inmates, 7 had something to do with marijuana, and of those 7, only 2 were purely marijuana and not there with a multitude of violations, probation violations, things like that.
All right,
so I don't think that we're going to have a I don't think that we're going to have a huge situation where there's all these people and there's all this dollars being spent on this and what have you.
But if you have 2 who should not be in jail, those 2 should be released.
Right. Assuming that's a minor amount of possession, assuming that it's a first or second time use. Yeah, a lot of cities around Michigan have decriminalized. In Grand Rapids, it's more serious to go 35 and a 30 from a fine standpoint than it is to use marijuana the first time, and yet people are saying it's too tough a law. But that doesn't make sense to me.
Under the new law that just passed, though, a violation is up to $500. So the trouble that you can get into, $500. That's it. It's a civil infraction. You cannot go to jail. If you have 2.6 ounces of marijuana, $500, can't go to jail. That's under the new laws. So I think that's probably realistic. I think the voters spoke, and we should listen to the voters. The voters said we want to make this a non-jailable offense, and that the police officers should be concentrating on other crimes, not the pot crimes. And so I think that that's a fair compromise, and that's the way it should be.
But as you talk to police officers today, they typically aren't focusing on that. There aren't huge raids on college campuses where people are being put in jail for, oh my goodness, he had a half an ounce of marijuana. Oh my goodness, he used his joint tonight. So it doesn't happen.
Though, and when you
there's always an outlier. There's always an outlier. That's not the rule.
Wayne County Sheriff's Department has made it a habit and accustomed to take people's cars when they find the opportunity to do so. And they're not doing it to protect the public or to increase public safety. They're doing it to enrich themselves because that money that they get from it, they get to keep and that they use.
And that may be more of a policing problem in one particular part of the state than something that impacts people in 83 counties, okay? So that's not something that's happening all over the place, at least according to every law enforcement organization.
If it's happening at all,
even there, it's kind of an outlier.
But
I agree.
But you bring up an important part
that's not a marijuana.
An important aspect of this very subject. It's not just about the hash, it's about the cash. It's about this potentially multi-million, possibly billion-dollar business. And yet, as a businesswoman, you have to be very careful right now.
Absolutely. It's all about regulation. It's all about compliance. We are state regulated, we are state licensed, and the regulations and the requirements are extensive. We have a computer system that is connected to the state. What we sell is tracked seed to sale, at least eventually it will be tracked seed to sale. Right now, most of the provisioning centers are still operating under emergency rules as the state continues to finalize regulations. So yes, this could be a great business, but right now there are still lots of regulations to work out. And in the meantime, though, you still have people like myself who are in this business, and the last thing we want to do is jeopardize our licenses. They've been very expensive. They've been very time-consuming. We applied for our license on December 20th, and we haven't accepted our license yet, but we were approved on November 6th or 7th. So it took almost a year to get approved. Lawyer fees, lots of inspections by state officials, computer systems that are hooked up to the state. So yes, we are highly regulated, and we welcome that regulation.
And what's the profit margin in a medical marijuana dispensary at this point in time? Because I would guess, Q, that's not a ton of money. There's because of the regulations, because of all the issues that you've got to get to even get that pot in your store.
Right. Where are you going to get it from? And then, of course, you have 280E tax regulations, because to the federal government, we are considered an illegal enterprise, and so therefore we are not entitled to standard business deductions. So our effective tax rate is between 80 and 90%. So for those people who think that there's a lot of money to be made in this industry, of course, it's going to be a booming industry. But there are a lot of us who are into this because we recognize that this is a beautiful plant. That is a medicinal plant. It has helped millions of people all over this world, and it should never have been criminalized. And for many of us, the fight was to make sure that people know the truth and that people have safe access. So we are all about safe access and an inviting place at Botanic in Corktown.
Which really says, though, that Congress ought to have this debate. Because if we believe that there is medicinal benefits, that controlled recreational is good, it's got to come from Congress to decriminalize marijuana so banks can get in, so we can have real fair regulations, and people like you and others can at least get loans and apply business principles to this marijuana.
And remember, Congress is looking at it all the time. Just a couple months ago, they looked at rescheduling it. They had more hearings. They're getting pushed heavily by people with a lot of money on the pro-marijuana lobby side.
Like John Boehner.
So yeah, like John Boehner.
Yeah, imagine that, John Boehner, who spent his career fighting against us, and all of a sudden he's a board member.
And money talks, of course. You know, they're going to buy whoever they can buy because they want to try and profit from it. And Congress still hasn't decided to change it up.
But you also get tax revenue as well, do you not?
There's more than 2/3 of people in this country that support the legalization and decriminalization of marijuana. These congressmen, they have to do the will of the people, and that's what's coming on right now. They're doing what we want them to do.
Remember, legalization is different from decriminalization.
People want legalization. People want medical marijuana. That's what our congressmen are supposed to do, the will of the people.
And this had nothing to do with medical.
So it's not about what people are getting paid to do. This is doing their job.
People voted in recreational.
They like to
so the will of the people is recreational.
I know they did.
The people have spoken.
Hey, you guys did a great job of blending them, for sure.
The people have spoken, and so has this panel. You've heard from them. Now it's your turn as Charlie takes the show on the road.
Marijuana is now legal. What do you think about that?
I think it's pretty good. I think it's an appropriate thing to have happen.
I think people will be abusing it now that marijuana is going to be legal?
No.
It still could be a party drug, essentially, but I think it's more beneficial, I think, than alcohol.
Do you think people can make money in the business of marijuana?
Oh, I know people that have made money in the business of marijuana for a long time.
And I'm told that makes them get the munchies and they really like to eat, so in a sense that's a good thing.
With your marijuana card, you could get marijuana. Could you give me some of your marijuana?
No, I don't think I should. But I mean, I'm that kind of person I would share.
Still a crime under federal law.
Well, it depends on what you do with it.
Smoke it.
You can sell it, whatever, you know what I'm saying? But nah, you know what I'm saying?
If people are going to do it, regardless of if it's legal or not legal.
Time for final comments, beginning with Barton.
Thank you. The legalization of marijuana in Michigan, the best thing that could have happened is the fact that now police don't have to arrest people for simple possession of marijuana. Thank God that no longer has to happen. What now has to happen is that we have to restore the justice of the thousands of people that have been prosecuted, oftentimes disproportionately, for the use and possession of marijuana, including people like her husband, Rudy Gammo, who's in prison right now. He needs to get out because all he was doing was operating a medical marijuana dispensary, just like these other dispensaries that have been in operation for years.
Mita.
Well, I just want to ask the authorities to please think about releasing my husband soon, and I hope this new law help not just my husband, but a lot of citizens that they need to come home for minor crimes.
Hugh?
Thank you to everyone who has supported Botanic. We are open. We open on Election Day. We invite people to come down. We're at 2540 Rosa Parks. You have to have a medical marijuana card, though. Even though recreational use happens tomorrow, you still need a medical marijuana card to enter and purchase from a dispensary.
Scott?
With more marijuana around, more youth are going to have access. There's going to be more issues of drug driving. There's going to be more people abusing it. And we all need to be vigilant. We need to encourage folks to uphold the law. We need to encourage folks to interpret the law properly. And we need to really be vigilant because there's going to be challenges.
Smoke them if you got it. It's the law, why not? But do it within the law. At your home, not at a school, not on 9 Mile. Obey the law, there'll be no problem. There you go.
Coincidentally, on this day, December 5th in 1933, Prohibition ended. And liquor became legal in this country again. And so as of tonight, it's going to happen in terms of marijuana in Michigan. The only advice I would have is moderation. Moderation. We don't know where this road will lead, but be careful as we head toward the future. We thank you for your comments, and we thank you for watching this edition of Let It Rip.